The Fringe Podcast Summer Rewatch, Episode 6.
This is Lance Reddick, and you are listening to the Fringe Podcast.
Web hosting for the Fringe Podcast is provided by HostGator. Easy WordPress installation, unlimited domains, unlimited disk space, unlimited bandwidth, and a 99.9% uptime guarantee. On sale now for $6.36 a month. Visit thefringepodcast.com/hosting and start serving up your website from the best hosting company in any universe. Welcome back to the Fringe Podcast as we continue our summer rewatch series. We're still in season 2 this week, and we are getting into some really good episodes in this particular podcast. I'm excited to be talking about them. Tonight we're talking about Season 2, Episode 6, Earthling, Episode 7, Of Human Action, Episode 8, August, Episode 9, Snakehead, and Episode 10, Gray Matters. So we have some really good episodes tonight, and of course, the great thing about the Summer Rewatch is all of the great members of the Fringe Podcast community that we get to bring in each week and hear some really insightful things and get some fresh perspectives from these guys. So tonight we've got 4 members of the community on the line with us. We've got, for the first time ever, Devynn. How are you, Devynn?
I'm doing pretty good.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm Devynn. I live in Colorado. Just graduated from high school. I'm going to be moving to Chicago and going to film school. So that's exciting stuff.
Yeah.
Been watching Fringe since day one. I was a huge fan of Lost, and then I saw commercials just for Fringe, and I saw, oh, J.J. Abrams. That's the guy who made Lost. That must mean this is going to be pretty good. And so I tuned in, and I loved it. And I've been listening to the Fringe Podcast since midway through season 2. I believe Jacksonville was the episode I first started listening to.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Very cool. And we also have another first-timer on the line with us tonight, Brandon. How are you?
Not bad. How are you?
I'm doing excellent, thank you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, obviously my name is Brandon. I am from Rhode Island. I just graduated with bachelor's degrees in music composition and computer science, and I'm going back for a master's in computer science.
Excellent.
I have been watching Fringe since the pilot episode, another person who was hooked on it from Lost, just following J.J. Abrams' projects around. But I've only gotten into the podcast since around season 4. Funny story, I actually got my mom into Fringe, and she proceeded to, in a couple of months, actually catch up and go past where I was, since I was a little bit behind, and she found the podcast first, so I found it from her.
Oh, great. Well, kudos to your mom.
I forgot to mention, in the chat room, people may know me as Toa of Pie, or as I am choosing to go this week, Brain Slice of Pie.
Nice. Yeah, I was actually just about to mention that. And Devynn, do you have a nickname that you normally go by in our chat room or anything?
I don't think I've actually ever been on the chat room.
Okay. Okay, I wasn't sure. All right, Allan, why don't you tell us about yourself? This is your second time to join us for the Summer Rewatch.
Yes, I intend to join in every season.
Yeah.
So you'll expect me in season 3.
Why don't you make the entire listening audience jealous by telling us what you got for your birthday this week?
Yeah, because I had my birthday Wednesday, and that's 27th of June. And I'm actually sharing a birthday with J.J. Abrams.
Yeah.
And so we went out with my friends, and they surprised me with a gift. And I opened it, and I was like, okay, it's a frame, so maybe it's like a joke. Probably it's just my face over it. It's like, right. So I was opening it, it's like, hang on. What is this? And then I saw it's like, oh my god, it's a copy of a pilot episode of Fringe with some scribbles on it. I was like checking the scribbles, like, oh my god, they're actually signatures. And the very, very, very biggest signature over there is actually J.J. Abrams' signature. And it says their happy birthday. So that's really, really awesome because I pretty much all the cast is in there.
Yeah.
So Anna Torv, Jessica Nicole, Blair Brown, Lance Reddick, Mark Valley.
John Noble's on there.
John Noble. Who else? Miss Kirk Acevedo.
I'm
And
so jealous.
yeah, I'm actually looking at it now.
Are you?
Mm.
I'll give you my address after the show. You can send that to me for my birthday.
Ha ha ha.
What did you get JJ for his birthday?
That's a good question.
I watch his shows.
All right. Well, Allan, it's great to have you with us again tonight, and congratulations on the awesome birthday gift. And then our fourth member tonight is another person you guys will know. She's been on with us a couple of times already this season, a very active member of our community, and that is Heather from Utah. How are you, Heather?
Hello, I'm good.
I love your hello. I know I say that every time, but it's you, you know? It's your trademark.
Oh, thanks.
Well, we're glad to have all of you guys tonight. So let's get it started. I had to make sure I had the food for thought queued up here. I do. So it might take a little bit longer tonight since we've got that fourth person, so I want to make sure we get right into it. So let's play that music and get started.
Root beer float.
Butterscotch pudding.
Mr. Papaya. Fruit cocktail. Coffee yogurt.
All righty. Boy, we had lots and lots of food in this batch of episodes. You know, we had Walter trying to come up with the new strawberry milkshake recipe since his favorite ice cream stand was shutting down. What else did we have? Help me out.
One thing I thought was really interesting was at the beginning of Human Action, Walter is talking to Astrid about what brains taste like.
Yes.
And he thinks that they taste like chicken. And, of course, by letters of transit in 2036, he says that he has had brains and that they were sweeter than you would think.
Yeah, I had made a note on that, too. So apparently sometime between that episode and in the future, he's tasted brains.
Well, he got the idea presented to him, so he had to act on the hypothesis.
I guess maybe now we know what he did with his own his own pieces of brain after they died in Gray Matters. You never know, right? It's Walter.
That's just wrong.
We also have crepes,
Yes.
and we
had
also
some
have
licorice.
chicken wings.
Chicken wings, that's the one I was trying to think of. That's at the very end of Gray Matters, yes. Yeah.
There was some type of thing with beans in Snakehead. I couldn't tell what. Some sort of liquid
Red
thing.
bean.
Okay. I guess I'm not remembering.
It's a
that
red
one.
bean.
Okay.
The drinks that him and Astrid were going to get.
Oh, those were disgusting looking too, weren't they?
Not really.
No, you thought they looked good?
They looked a lot like the boba drinks people have, which are really, well, like, they're kind of like fruit drinks.
Yeah.
In a way, and then they have those big tapioca pieces in them.
Yeah, and I like those. I think it was just the color to me. I think maybe because he mentioned he could put fish head in it for omegas or whatever. But to me, so just the
I
color
think
of
he's
it looked
just
like bloody.
pulling Jessica, pulling
Astrid?
her leg.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe not.
Seemed real to me.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
I never had one with a fish head.
Yeah, I haven't either. But
You haven't lived until you've had one with a fish head.
well, I won't live then, I guess.
It can completely change your circadian rhythm.
Nice. You worked that in really fast. That's great. That was like a challenge for those who are not in the live show. Before we started the episode, it's like almost 1 o'clock in the morning for Allan, or I guess it is now. And he said he was trying to adjust his circadian rhythm. So I threw out a challenge to try to work that in sometime in the podcast. And there it is. Was that Brandon or Devynn that did that?
Brandon.
Oh, nice job, Brandon. All right, well, let's get into the episodes here with our first episode of this batch called Earthling. The synopsis from our friends over at fringepedia.net says the Fringe Division takes on a puzzling investigation of victims who inexplicably disintegrate into ash. The shadowy case casts a light on Philip Broyle's past and entice the team with the possibilities of foreign fringe science. This was written by Joel Wyman and Jeff Vlaming, and directed by John Cassar. You guys may remember that after this episode, we were privileged to have John Cassar as a guest on our podcast. All right, so we're going to get into the discussion, and why don't we start with Brandon?
Okay, just a one-off note. Peter made a comment about Russian fringe science, and I was wondering if there was the potential for a spin-off series after season 5 wraps up.
I don't know.
Probably not.
Probably not. But they have looked at some Russian stuff in the comics. The Russian science teams, we've seen that a couple of times in the comics, but probably not.
All right. Some other things I thought. I really liked the special effects in this week's episode.
Uh-huh.
The shadow figure and the people crumbling, especially at the end where Tamura is standing still and then the fan just turns on him.
Yeah.
Something like that.
I agree.
You were saying something?
No, I just said I agree. I think it was great.
Besides that, my favorite moments of this episode were really getting to see more of Broyle's abilities. I don't ever remember him being in the field that much besides just showing up and directing people to do things. Mm-hmm. It was a really nice way to flesh out his character a bit.
Yeah. Definitely. All right.
That's it from my end.
Okay. Devin, what about you?
Again, I just really like how they pulled in Broyles. I mean, I guess you can say it was kind of a Broyles-centric episode, and especially up to this point in season 2, throughout the whole series, like we've gotten Broyles, but not that much of him, and it was great just to be able to like delve into his character, especially like just with like his personal life, finding out about his family and all that stuff. It was great because I love character development and action packed into an episode really well, and they did that great with this episode. Yeah. And I really love Fringe has always been this way, but for some reason this episode just stood out to me really well. Was everything was morally gray. It was like in this morally gray zone. So yeah, people were dying, but it wasn't like intentional, and he's hurting people, but he's just trying to help his brother and everything. So I thought that was just great how they, keep up their morally questionable theme throughout the series.
Yeah. That's a good point. I've got a follow up to that in just a minute. I think that's a good point. Heather, what about you?
One thing I noticed that the first Broyles is in the restaurant and the little boy's copying him or shadowing him, like the shadow we see later in the episode, which I thought was fun. And then you find out that Broyles has worked in the Fringe division for quite a while, at least 4 years. But we don't know about the previous Fringe team, even though it's been hinted that the X-Files is them, And so, yeah. And Fringe seems to like to electric shock people a lot. So, since Peter's been shocked, and this guy, and it happens kind of often.
That's true. I had forgotten that earlier. Season 1, like episode, what was that? Like episode...
with the Mr. Smith.
It was Joseph Smith. Yeah, I don't remember what the name of the episode was. We just watched it, of course. But yeah, he got electrocuted.
Power hungry.
Was it? No, that was Joseph Mingard. It was. It's in which we meet Mr. Jones. That's what it was, because they had to get Little Hill out of the guy.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Anything else, Heather?
Yep. The little girl at the end, she's in the hotel watching a movie or like an animation, and there's a lion, and he says, "I may be a different color, but I'm still a lion like you."
Yeah.
Which, of course, it can refer to your alternate self, because there's red and blue, different colors.
Yeah.
But then I also jumped to shapeshifters. You can say they're silver, like they're silver blood. Okay. But as we find out later, some of them are still really human in that they develop feelings and loyalties too.
Yeah.
I thought it was it's more an allusion to Peter, because that whole season is about more or less is about Peter and how Kimba, the White Lion, is different from, because I think the story is about that lion is specifically different from that tribe of lions, and somehow like Peter is different in this universe, and yeah. So basically, that's how that's how I understand it.
Yeah, I like that too.
Also, Walter earlier in the episode says how the organism inside the cosmonaut projects another version of itself. So there we get another hint of the alternate universe and other versions of people. And yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Allan, what about you?
Yeah. At first, I didn't really like this episode, especially when I first watched it in season 2.
Okay.
Because it looks like it just doesn't fit in very well for me. Especially it deals with about space and the possibility of alien connection, which I'm actually worried about Fringe going that way, like how, because X-Files was about aliens and I don't want Fringe to become about aliens.
Okay.
So, but after rewatching this episode, knowing what happened from season 1 to season 4,
Yeah.
I appreciate it more because this episode actually introduces a lot of characters that recurred
Right.
in the next few episodes, which one of them is Senator Van Horn.
Right.
And Agent Edwards, which is the CIA man at the end of the episode, Diane, who is the ex-wife of Broyles.
Right.
And I was just wondering whether if in this episode the senator has been replaced by a shapeshifter or not. What do you guys think?
I've forgotten about that line.
I was thinking on that, and in my mind I was already assuming he was a shapeshifter, and so I was asking myself, why is he helping Broyles and encouraging him if he's a shapeshifter already?
Yeah.
And so one reason could be because the red side also wants information, like the information that Walter knows, and so if they help Broyles, they'll get that out. But he could still be human at this point because the CIA man tells Broyles, you have a real friend in Senator Horn. And so if the CIA man had every reason to trust him, maybe he was still human. And after that, the shapeshifters found that out and said, well, he's been vouched for a lot, so we'll replace him and they'll still trust him.
Yeah.
Or to counter that, it could mean that just because he seemed like a friend doesn't mean that he wasn't already. I mean, Charlie seemed like a friend when he was a shapeshifter, so
yeah,
I'm really not sure. It's a good question.
Yeah, and the other thought I had was that when we do finally learn that Senator Van Horn is a shapeshifter, we see how friendly he is. I mean, he's getting lemonade from those girls, and he seems to be one of those shapeshifters that has really developed a sincere appreciation and fondness for their human counterpart that they've taken over. So it could be that he is a shapeshifter, but he's kind of liking the role he's got there, and maybe he's starting to turn soft towards the blue side.
But the thing about this shapeshifter, they cannot really stay in the same body for a long time, right?
I think we've had inconsistencies there.
Yeah, it's inconsistent because Charlie was falling apart after a while, but I know there's a season 2 episode later where we meet a shapeshifter who he's really gotten used to the family that he's been with, so obviously he's been there a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's in season 3, the security guard guy.
Right.
Oh yeah, beginning of 3.
Yeah.
Was it because Charlie's shifting device was broken? Was that why he was wearing out, or?
No idea.
Well, I see. They said that he needed to get into another body.
That it was broken. It's that the Fringe team had it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I think they've been inconsistent about it.
Yeah. Also, in this episode, because it's Broyles centric, and we finally found out that he actually broke up with his wife. So I was wondering whether if this is the branching point of broils and alternate broils, because the alternate broils got his family intact.
Right.
So whether this case has been solved by alt broils early on before this episode, or the case doesn't exist in the alternate universe.
Yeah, or
And
he...
then-
Go ahead, Heather.
Oh, well, he says how it was 4 years ago, so if you use the time it was aired, this case happened in 2004, and so I don't know if you remember if there's any years referenced in Red Royals with how that was either, but...
Yeah.
Just
or
going
maybe...
on
Oh, well, in the alternate universe, we have that his son was abducted,
Right.
and I don't remember when that happened to his son, but it seems like in that episode, the son being abducted made their family, pull together to support the son. So maybe because that happened, even if they had been having problems, they pulled back to be close, versus Broyles, who didn't have something other than his job to make him come back to his family.
Yeah, that's a possibility. Yeah, I like that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, anything else, Alan?
Well, no, not really.
Okay. One thing I was going to follow up on, and this is back to what Devyn mentioned earlier about how, this brother was killing people, but he was doing it in an kind of out of the attitude he was trying to help his brother, and that's one of the things that I've loved about Fringe. Nothing's ever really black and white. I mean, even in times when we think something is black and white, for example, we used to think that the Redverse was just evil, and even Waldronate was just evil. But then the more that we see their perspective, by the time that the Redverse went away, spoiler alert for those who haven't watched all of Fringe yet, but we had a genuine affection for all those people, and so nothing is ever really black and white with Fringe, and even you see here in these first couple of seasons where Olivia thinks that the work that Walter and William did was evil and that they permanently damaged people. But by the time we get through season 4, we see that that's not quite as black and white as as it could be. So anyway, sorry, Heather, you're getting a lot of noise there again. But the thing I was trying to get around to was that this was another example of what would you do for someone that you love, and we've seen that theme over and over again with Fringe. We'll see it continue on throughout the rest of the series. So this is what I was thinking with regards to the observers. I think we're all kind of the opinion that going into season 5, the observers turn out to be evil. We don't like them anymore, except for September and his little group of people that were friendly. But by and large, the observers are evil, and we have the opinion that they ruined their future, and so they are coming back to take over the Earth because they ruined their own future. But I wouldn't be surprised if it turns out that it's not quite as black and white as that. There's a whole lot of gray. And I think it would also be cool if it turns out to be another case of what would you do for someone you love, and that perhaps the motivation as to why they're doing that turns out to go along with that same theme that we have seen from Fringe really since almost day one. What do you guys think?
It's all just different shades of red and blue.
Okay. Okay. Well, all right. No discussion. One thing I thought was a good quote. This one came from, I'm trying to think of who. I think this came from Walter. He says, "I believe the Russians have tried to remove the organism from the cosmonaut, but they couldn't."
Yeah, that's Walter.
Yep.
He says the two have become one, bonded at a molecular level. They can't be separated, and you can't kill the organism without killing them both. And I think that also kind of gave us a foreshadowing of really the relationship between the two universes, where we hear that if you destroy one, you destroy them both, and that sort of thing. So I think it was a nice foreshadowing of really the major plot line that was to come.
They even showed it with the Tinker Toys.
Yeah, that's
so
right. Mm-hmm.
It was a good imagery.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That they actually separate out the chemical Tinker Toys, but they can't separate out in two entities because they're actually linked together.
Right. All right. Any other points here on Earthling?
I have two.
Okay.
One was you said, just commenting on something you said about that at this point we thought that William Bell and Walter's experiments with the children had messed up a lot of people's lives.
Right.
And I just really wanted to jump in and say that by season 4, we knew that it had messed up a lot of lives.
That's true. It did. But at the same time, it did equip some of them. I mean, obviously some of them were completely screwed up. But in other cases, like Olivia and others, we've seen other Cortex fan kids come and become useful. So there wasn't a total messing up of people.
Mm. The other thing I wanted to say was going back to the girl at the end of the episode that it looked like had just been attacked by the cosmonaut shadow creature thing.
Uh-huh.
Did we ever get a name for that, by the way?
The shadow. That's all I know.
Okay. But it reminded me of... looked like Ella had been attacked by the hand reaching out.
Okay.
And just up until the last moment where she suddenly starts talking and we see that she's fine, and that I thought that was just an interesting connection.
Huh.
They seem to really like threatening kids in this very similar pattern.
Yeah, it was very similar.
And then I have one more point real quick.
Okay.
I think you guys actually brought this up on the podcast a while back, but I noticed when Broyles and Senator Van Horn were talking on the bench, he called him Dennis, I believe.
That's right.
And then in season 3, he's called James.
Yep, that's another
I think
inconsistency.
There was also another. I think in his either something like a file, it's another name, if I remember it right.
Yeah, I don't remember that. Sorry about that. The stream froze, so I'm trying to unfreeze it for the folks that are in the chat room here, watching it live. Let's see if that works. Yep, still frozen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the broadcast, start it again. It's probably going to serve up another ad. Let's see if it does. Yep, I'm going to mute that while the ad plays. All right, while that does that, I'll go ahead and segue us into the next episode. The glyphs in this episode spelled deja vu. And the clue for the next episode, we're not really sure here what the clue was. We have a couple of ideas. One could be that at the beginning of the episode, there was a gargoyle statue, and gargoyles are intended to ward off, kind of evil thoughts or evil spirits. And the boy in the next episode was able to use thoughts to do evil things.
Stretch.
So, Allan, you put a couple of, I think Allan put these in here. Why don't you explain these other possibilities that you put in here for the possible clue for the next episode?
Yeah, in the apartment of Randy, the guy who has been turned into ash, there was the television screen that goes into a white noise. So it's like the teddy bear used by Walter to try to defend themselves from the mind control of the supposed kidnappers.
Okay.
And also in the TV, there's one of the shots. It's actually a military helicopter, which is the mind control military pilot used by Carson in his experiment.
Okay.
And another one, which is I found a lot of brain scans, or like 2 brain scans in a laptop of a very dark hospital. which signifies like the hematomas in the brain caused by the mind control.
Okay. Well, I don't know. I mean, it was real unclear on this one. It could be any of those, I suppose. But whatever it is, the next episode is of human action. And the synopsis says, kidnapping escalates into a hostage situation. And when authorities corner the suspects, they discover the victim has unique abilities developed with Fringe science research. The investigation intensifies when a team member is taken and forced to commit horrific acts. Another layer is peeled off of the massive dynamic facade. This episode was written by Glenn Whitman and Robert Chiappetta and directed by Joe Chappelle. All right, Devin, you are up.
Sounds good. I didn't really care for this episode, to be honest.
Okay.
I mean, it did have, in my opinion, great rewatch value, because the second time you're watching through, especially the opening sequence, it kind of makes more sense what's going on.
Yeah.
And you kind of see why the characters are acting the way they did. But to me, it felt like, kind of whiny teenage angst a lot. And that's not something I really want to watch on TV,
Yeah.
But it was really clever, which I like. I love the clever writing. And yeah, I think that's about it.
Okay. All right, Heather, what about you?
Okay, I have some different notes here. At the end, Nina is writing to Belly, and she says that the Carson Penrose experiments have been successful.
Right.
And Carson is for Dr. Carson in the episode. Penrose, last we heard, was in episode 2, the same old story of season 1,
Right.
where they take, they genetically engineered children as test tube babies to grow them up to be soldiers.
Uh-huh.
And I would say Tyler could be like the perfect soldier because he doesn't need weapons. He just uses his mind. And so when I first saw the same old story, I'm like, why did they name it the same old story? But I think one thing is we have repeating again and again the same old story of Walter and Belly having experiments together and not being afraid to experiment on children.
Okay.
And as with Cortexiphan, experimenting on children, which is what Massive Dynamic continues on Belly's same wavelength of human experimentation and children experimentation. And so, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I thought,
Go ahead.
Another thing kind of going in with this, because I remembered from before that the scientist isn't really the kid's father, for all we know, and so he starts to say, when we first meet him, he says how working at Massive Dynamic, he says, what I do here is my life, and then he starts to say, it's, and then he trails off, and the first line that jumped into my mind was, it's all I care about. And so you could still look at it that way because he has a foster son made by the company and given to him. He's working in their aerospace division, but he's also helping with the biological experiments by raising this kid and giving him drugs. And Massive Dynamic, of course, pays the ransom for the kid because they want to pay for their own experiments. And so, and then at the end we find out there's at least 5 different Tylers out there, all being raised by some people who are probably also Massive Dynamic employees.
Yeah. Okay.
So.
Yeah, I like that. What else?
We get another hint about Peter, because Walter says, I can't lose him again.
Uh-huh.
And we get, of course, the old excuse of someone dying in a car accident, which is Walter's he had a car accident and that's how he ended up in the lake, the cover story there. And it was mentioned before how Tyler says, my dad lied to me my entire life, which, Walter has done lots of lying himself.
Yeah, I had that written down too.
Yeah, there's the parallel of a scientist's father and a son who's not his real son.
Right.
And who he's also experimented on.
Yeah, and lied his whole life. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought this episode did a lot of that, more of that building up. I told my wife, I watched these first 3 episodes and then the last 2, and I'm sorry, I didn't do that. I was thinking of the last one we just watched, which was Dream Logic, and then these first 2, and for me they were kind of just they were okay episodes, but they weren't like really stellar episodes. And I remember telling her that this was that period of time when every week they're giving these clues about these parallels between the secrets of Peter and this secret that Walter is hiding, and the audience knows what it is, but Peter doesn't. Yeah. And you see their relationship building and building and building, and Peter's genuinely, developing this affection for Walter, and we know it's just to tear it down. And I was wondering if I was going to get those same, like, come on already feelings, and I am. I certainly am. And there was a lot of that in this episode. And Heather, you just keyed in on a lot of it, yeah. What else do you have, Heather? I kind of hijacked you there, sorry.
Oh, well, just one more thing. Walter says how Peter's mother was a strong woman, which Peter probably doubts because he knows she committed suicide. But I thought, well, she had to be strong to deal with Walter and all of his issues.
Yeah.
But she also had to be strong to raise a son that was not her son, which we see later when we get the backstory in the 2 1985 episodes, how she really struggled with it, but then, she ended up still accepting him and rising to the occasion in a way.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else?
That's it for my notes.
All right. Allan, you're up. All right, Allan, you ready?
Yeah. There's such an awkward silence.
Well, we get, I don't know, Heather, something with Heather's connection, we get a whole lot of noise out of her machine. It kind of comes in and goes. So.
I was wondering if there was a problem.
Yeah.
All right. So I really love this episode, even when I first watched it during season 2, mainly because it actually deals with an episode that everyone thinks it's a standalone episode, which is the same old story.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I like about Fringe. They give you a standalone episode that you think it's a standalone.
Yeah.
But in the later episode or later season, you'll get to see that, oh, hang on, this is an important episode.
Yeah.
Should go back to it. And so we have this again parallel of the Penrose and his kid, and Carson and his kid, and also Walter and Peter, which which I really like about this episode. Also, there's a lot of great quotes which like subtly hinting a lot of things about Fringe. So one of them is Tom Dobbins, which is the supposed kidnapper, said that you have no idea what you're dealing with. It's almost like him telling the audience that Fringe is about that. That we don't really know what is happening on Fringe. Mm-hmm. That maybe in the next episode it will completely change the whole thing about the show.
Okay.
And there's another one which Peter said is think they could be spies. Maybe they're hiding in plain sight.
Yeah.
And then Olivia said foreign intelligence agents often take mundane jobs so they can blend in while they gathered information.
Yeah.
So it's actually like they're talking about the observers.
Or the shapeshifters.
Or the shapeshifters.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's something that Fringe writers actually put in that make us think that it might mean something else. And another one which Olivia said to James Carson, that they took your son for a reason, which is almost like her telling Walter telling Walternet that his son was taken by Walter to cure Peter.
Okay.
And yeah, there's also a line from Walter saying that Carson is not cannot be a proper parent, and which is a result of his son being kidnapped. So it's like him telling to Carson, but it's actually him telling to himself that he has not become a good parent, or he is actually telling Walter that he's not a good parent because he wasn't able to find that cure for his son.
Right.
Yeah. So also in this episode, because Peter was kidnapped, this somehow makes us feel that Peter is an important figure for Walter and Olivia, and and because of that, we actually grown attached to Peter, and also the character has been attached to Peter, that we felt that when Peter was vanished into thin air in season 4, we felt like there's something wrong with the universe of Fringe, and same with the characters themselves. Also, in this episode, this is the first time Walter visited Massive Dynamic.
Yeah, I had that note too. It was an interesting reaction too.
Mm-hmm. That's all I have.
Okay. Very good. Good stuff. All right, Brandon, what about you?
I was able to connect this to a bunch of other episodes. First of all, this is the following Earthling. This is the second episode in a row where the Fringe team has been pulled off the investigation by the end of the episode, but they continue to try to solve it anyway.
Huh.
Thought that was rather interesting. At one point in the episode, Walter uses a teddy bear from Peter's childhood, which reproduces the in utero experience with white noise. And in season 4, Walter uses a teddy bear with a camera inside it to record footage of the observer in his lab, which makes me wonder exactly how many different teddy bears with these utilitarian... I lost my thought, but how many different teddy bears did Peter have that did various things?
Yeah, that's funny. I forgot all about that. That's good.
Other thing was at the very end of the episode, Nina is typing to William Bell on a rather old-looking computer. I mean, the GUI didn't look at all like a modern computer would, which reminded me of how the shapeshifters communicate between universes via typewriter.
Yep.
And I was wondering if there was some sort of connection, because they're both using outdated technology in order to communicate between universes.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know if anybody else had some thoughts on that.
Maybe it's because the first gateway that Walter made was in 1985, and so things that are that time or before somehow resonate better. Or maybe it's that, well, we have the universes vibrate at different frequencies, and maybe electronical things, when they create their own vibrations or whatever, interfere too much, so we need things like typewriters that won't have interfering signals or noise or things. There's also the idea that sometimes older things are not as easy to hack into. Like your email can be hacked into really easy, but if you send a letter, sometimes it can be safer.
That's a good point.
Yep.
Yeah.
Also, it's not only between universes, but the observers actually uses old tech.
What do you mean?
We actually going to get to see that in the episode August.
You think that's old tech?
Fax.
They have a really old printer. I know that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
they
that's
look like
true.
some sort of like a fax machine or something like that.
I was thinking of the handheld device, but okay, I can give you that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. All right. Any other thoughts on this episode from anybody?
The other thing I noticed was that I watched the DVD bonus features where they explained a couple of the special effects. There was rather large setups for things that I just thought of as normal, like some of them falling up the building. Well, that's not normal, but for the show anyway. And a car going through a door and then flipping over and explodes. But it was interesting to just they had a rather large setup. Like they explained that the car that they needed to flip over and blow up, they spent a week preparing it. And I thought that was just rather interesting how much work they put into this show.
Interesting, yeah. I wouldn't have thought it would be that. I mean, because you see those things all the time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. All right. Well, the glyphs for this episode spelled arrive, and I think that's interesting because that points to the next episode, probably, which is August, which is all about the observers. The last observer-centric episode we had was called Arrival, so that might be a connection there. The clue,
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
When did they make the shift, or I don't know if anybody knows this, the shift between the glyphs referring to that episode versus referring to the next episode along?
I couldn't tell you.
We never know what they refer to, because sometimes they fit with the episode, sometimes they fit with the next one, sometimes, like, they haven't fit exactly, or, like...
Honestly, I think the glyphs are just gimmick and just BS.
Because what if they don't know how many commercial breaks they're going to have till, like, way later, and they can't change the episode, so they just had to find some word that works.
Actually, with that, they do know, because when they write the script, the act breaks that they put in the script, that's how many commercials they have.
Yeah.
That's funny. Just a gimmick, all right. Well,
yeah.
Gimmick or not, the glyphs were arrive, and the clue, this is another one where we weren't quite sure, but we saw a book in this episode called Wonders. Maybe, I'm not sure what the book was about, if it was about the 7 wonders of the world or not, but it could be pointing to Christine, which we saw in this next episode, August. She was on her way to study in Rome. I think she was going to study, was it pottery or ceramics or sculpture? Yeah. But that's where the Colosseum is located, and the Colosseum is one of the wonders of the world. So maybe, but again, we're not quite sure on that one. But that
there's another possible clue, which is I think there's a word rescue, in the military plane, in the Carson experiment.
Okay.
If I remember it correctly, and it's sort of it's sort of like a foreshadowing of August rescuing.
Yeah. Particularly
Christine
if it was on a plane.
From a plane.
Yeah.
There's also teddy bears in both episodes.
That's true. There are teddy bears in both episodes. Yeah. Well, the synopsis for August says a public abduction in Boston sends the team chasing after one of the mysterious observers. One observer has violated an important rule of engagement by preventing the certain death of someone he has cared for over the past 2 decades. As more observers gather to rein in one of their own, they also have time to make a few observations about a member of the Fringe Division. This episode was written by J.H. Wyman and Jeff Pinkner and directed by Dennis Smith. All right, Heather, you are up.
Oh, okay. I have stuff, of course. All right. They had the previously on Fringe things for all these episodes, and so some of it was really nice. But previously they talked about how we refer to him as an observer, which made me think we don't know what their own name is for themselves. Mm-hmm. They just adopted our name, and in that way they get to keep their own secrets and not reveal any information to us of who they really are, anything about themselves. Yeah. That's what we kind of see and guess. But he starts the car engine with his finger, so he has his own electromagnetic energy, like Olivia, who can turn on lights. And the idea has been put out there before that somehow she's connected to the observers. And Peter asks later in the episode, he says they're looking for something. What are they looking for? Because how they jump through time all over. And But they always seem to, well, in recent times, they go and congregate around the Fringe team. So maybe that's the important thing they're looking for. Walter and the Cortexiphan and Olivia activating and crossing over and Peter switching and all that stuff. Because, well, we see in the future that is a very important thing.
Yeah.
That ends up intersecting with the observer history in some way of that there. So, yeah, and we of course get more references to Peter's history when September says the owner only interfered to correct a mistake of his own making, which we learn about those details later. And then of course Walter, he repeats the same old story again of there was a car crash and, you know, but in this one, you can tell he's lying because he does not look like he's sharing all the details.
Right.
And when he meets August, he tells them, he's like, oh, your friend and I had a deal. Don't take Peter. I know what I did was wrong. And August says, well, I need your help because you looked and reached beyond your limitations, which we know was the crossing over. But he just says, I just missed my son. So again, we find out about that. But then the next line I thought interesting. Walter said, you must be prepared to face the consequences. So he tells August to make her important, but he has to face the consequences, which Walter at the time didn't think of, but since then he's had all kinds of consequences he's had to deal with. Yeah. So he's giving the warning because he's had to experience that himself. So, I have more. Okay. We're told several times in the episode, they're like, why is this girl so important? Or why is she so special? You know? And at the end, we get the one idea that comes up. She's important because she creates love in August. And then so she becomes special. He becomes special in that he loves her.
Yeah.
And he himself says, why do I see her as important? At the end, he says, you know, she crossed my mind and she never left it. I think I have feelings and I love her. And September, I don't know how deliberate this was, but September says, you made her important, you know, so she will live. And then it looks like August died. And then September says, she is responsible for the death of one of us. Uh-huh. So August only got to hear she's important because, you know, somehow you're different because of her, but then September says no because she made the death of one of us, even though we know September has had sympathetic feelings for some of the humans he's been watching for. So
right.
I guess September in a way was kind of working for his bosses so he couldn't be attached, but also, you know, feeling for August in a way, and so letting him, you know, have his comfort in that part. So
okay.
Anyway, August catches bullets like Olivia ends up doing in season 4.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So we get to hear maybe our proto-observer Cortexiphan influenced something connections to the observers there, maybe. But, yeah. And there's been speculation made a lot before about how Peter firing August's gun in this show. They say maybe it was the last round.
Uh-huh.
But then they said maybe only observers can shoot the gun. But when he gives him the gun, he like puts it in his hand and then he like holds his arm for a bit. And I'm like, is he talking to him like telepathically? Or is he just like touching him so they can have a connection so him and Peter together can shoot the gun like Olivia and Peter together can do different things, you know? So that's the new idea I had on that one. So
it's also one of the signs that, you know, again, Peter is different.
Yeah.
In this season, they're just building up saying that hey, Peter is from alternate universe and he's different.
Yeah.
And it's like in the previous episode, he was able to try to beat that kid's mind control by offsetting the gun on Broyles. So yeah, so those are things probably that hints that Peter is from the alternate universe, or probably he's something like he's special because he's able to, fix the two universes, go into that machine.
Yeah, but both of those things that Heather mentioned also, for those who believe that Peter and Olivia are the mother and father or the grandfather of the observers, which I think they very well could be. I mean, Heather just pointed two things back in this episode that could be looked at clues right here. One is that Peter can fire the observer gun, and the other is that Olivia can stop bullets like the observers, like we've seen the observers do. So I think they very well could be clues that were laid down back here in season 2 for what could be revealed here in season 5.
Yep.
Hopefully we'll find out. What else, Heather?
A few little things. I don't know if other people were going to mention them, so I was going to save them unless you think I should mention them.
Okay. Why don't you hang on? We'll see if other folks mention those items, and then if not, you can come back to them.
Okay.
Allan, what about you? What notes do you have on this episode?
In this episode, I just find it very interesting when August was talking to Walter, and August said that he needs Walter's help, and that he actually cannot see a way how to prevent the death of Christine Hollis, which like how September said to Olivia that in any kind of any future she will always die or something like that. So and then August actually sacrificed himself in order to make Christine important. So I was actually wondering whether the death of September in season 4 made Olivia an important figure.
Possibly. That's a good. I hadn't thought about that connection. That's really interesting.
And also in this episode, they talk about irregularity. And Peter in season 4 is an irregularity, and they need to get rid of, just like Christine Hollis. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
I was wondering whether Christine Hollis will come back in the future, in the future episodes, because I don't really think that her importance was made because one of the observers died. So there should be like more importance to that. Because you don't sacrifice one observer for the sake of just, making a normal human being alive. I don't know. It's just my own personal feeling.
Okay. All right.
August mentions that when he first noticed her, it was after her parents died and she was crying, but she was still very brave, which we could say is a personality trait of Olivia as well. Like, she can be sympathetic and emotional, but she's very brave and just, fights through her pain and keeps doing what she needs to do to protect people. And Olivia also, in a way, has lost some parents and family members and people close to her. I don't know.
It will be cool if Christine is actually like become an important figure in some way in season 5, something like, I don't know, because she is existing in this, because August died and she's now existing, and therefore she causes some ripples that leads to some important events in season 5, something like that. I don't know.
Maybe she joins the Observer rebellion thing like when the observers come to take over the Earth later, she could be like, oh, I have seen these people before. I, need to join what's happening here somehow,
Hopefully.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, but the only observer that she has experience with is a friendly observer, and if the other observers turn out not to be friendly, which it looks like they won't be, then she might be joining the wrong side and not realize it.
Yeah.
I don't think we'll see her again, though. I mean, it would be cool,
think that
but
she might come back. Sorry for butting in, but one of my thoughts was that before I remembered the episode, why was she important? Because if the observer thought if August thought she was important because of the real reason, or the reason that we were given, that it's because he died, then wouldn't he have known that in order to make her important, he had to get himself killed? I think that since he didn't know that, he had to go to Walter for help to solve that problem, that there must have been something else, something important about her future that he must have seen, if that makes any sense.
yeah, it does.
Yeah.
And I hope you're right, but I just don't know. I mean, by now, she's a character that 90% of the audience is going to have forgotten about. And I mean, it could happen. I'd like to see it happen, but that's the only reason I say I don't think we'll see her again, is because no one's going to remember who she even is.
That's what the previously on part is for.
Previously, 3 years ago. It could happen. I just don't think it will. I wouldn't be against it at all.
In terms of this, like, I agree with you, Daryl, that, just pulling a one-episode character from, 2-3 seasons ago and bring her back, probably not going to happen.
Yeah.
But from the point of view of, like, a Fringe agent, if like, these observers are going to be coming back and we don't know much about them, like, if I was a Fringe agent, I would be like, okay, we have to pull on all of our resources. And seeing as everything, Christine Hollis went through, and the fact that, she survived when she was supposed to die and she had experience with these observers, I'd at least try and go back to her and try and, figure out more about the observers, if at all possible, or try to, like, recruit her or something. So, I mean, I agree it's probably not going to happen, but it'd just be cool, I guess. Wishful thinking.
Yeah.
Well, in the storyline, she doesn't even have to exist physically. Like, the agents or whoever can just mention her, like, oh, this girl actually affects the timeline or whatever. It's just something that will validate her importance more than just August dying. That's the whole thing that I actually want to see in Fringe.
Okay.
And we don't know what August told her in between our getting to see them interact, because she was with him, like, for some time, so we don't know if he talked to her and shared more things with her, or what other, like, observer abilities she saw, or they could have all this on a file after they interviewed her, but they just not told us yet, or,
Sure.
Well, wasn't there a part towards the end when they're at her apartment or something, and then Peter was interviewing her and he asked her, did he tell you anything, why he saved you? And then she said no? Or...
I think there was, but I don't know.
I don't remember. How sad is that? All right, Alan, anything else from you?
Nah, that's all I got.
All right. Brandon, what about you?
Okay, so first of all, I may be a little biased, but I liked Brandon's explanation about how the observers view time.
Yes.
About how they, well, besides just the constant spilling on Olivia's shoe, which was interesting camera work, but about how they don't view it linearly, they can see it all at once. It actually reminded me a little bit of myself, how I'm doing the rewatch, because I've been rewatching these episodes. I've also been watching the series with my girlfriend, getting her caught up to speed. So I would watch the season 3 finale, and then I would jump back into season 1 and realize, oh, look, Peter's back. Oh, wait, never mind. And, I mean, just today I saw Gray Matters, and then a couple hours later I saw Brave New World Parts 1 and 2. So, also, just as an interesting note, I've been watching these episodes. I figured I wouldn't have time to do the full rewatch during the summer, so I've been watching them twice as fast as everybody else. I put the DVDs in, boot up VLC, and speed up the video.
Okay.
So I can watch each episode in around 25 minutes.
Nice.
But anyway, some other observations that I thought. I thought it was interesting that the observers write from right to left instead of left to right.
Right.
It was interesting to see August step in and save someone's life, which reminded me of something that hasn't happened yet. Yeah, figure that one out. About what we think that September and some of the other observers do during the Purge, theoretically at least, because we hear that not all the observers were bad, right, and what happened to September was just unthinkable. So I'm thinking that he must have done something similar in terms of stepping in to help save someone.
Yeah, I like that.
So that's an interesting parallel. What else do I have? Oh, there was some nice advertising. We had a close-up view of a Ford steering wheel, and Olivia uses the car to make a phone call.
Yeah, that's right.
Which is all because of this turns out to be yet another episode where people's daily lives are ruined by Fringe events. It's another one of those themes throughout the series. We see people whenever you see people getting ready for some sort of fun event in their life, you know that within a couple minutes there's going to be that phone call of the world's ending and you need to go save it again.
That's right. Yeah.
I also, this was something I liked. The Observer takes the girl to the Bell Motel, but spelled B-E-L-L-E.
Right.
I thought that was an interesting. I don't know if that was a coincidence or whether they found some place with that name and they realized, okay, that's just too funny. We have to film something here.
It's Belly.
Ooh.
No, I was thinking like the French version, but yeah, I do like that. The Observer goes to the Belly Motel. And the only other note that I had was that the Observer's message to the assassin is green, 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 red.
Yeah. Yeah. And he seemed to know exactly what that meant.
It seemed like it just told him to turn on his fax machine so he could get the rest of the message.
That's right. Go to your car, pull out the ancient printer, and it will wirelessly transmit a message to you.
What we didn't know is that that's the same message back in all those other episodes ago when we first saw green, 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 red. It meant the exact same thing. But
do you guys think maybe the green, 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 red is not like a message, but it's actually a hypnotic suggestion by the Observer?
I like that.
Transmitting. Oh, I forgot the word. Transmitting telepathic thought through technology.
Okay.
Because he was holding the thing and he sees it and then he's told what to do. And then you know that the observers have telepathy skills.
Yeah.
I like that suggestion, Alan, to think that the green, 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 red suddenly hypnotized a man into doing whatever the observers wanted him to do.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. So, Brandon, just to clarify, what was your favorite scene in this episode?
I didn't know I had one, but
it being gag.
I thought you said it was the time description by Brandon, the scientist.
Yeah, that's right. I did like when Brandon is describing the observers and with just the blue water. Notice because they're in the blue verse. Obviously, if they were in the red verse, they would have used something like fruit punch.
All right, and what's your first name?
Brandon.
All right, that's invalidated.
Yes.
Sorry, I couldn't pass it up. All right, Devin, why don't you lay down some thoughts for us here?
Real quick on the green, 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 red.
Yeah.
I really like that idea, but honestly, I feel like the green, 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 red might be to Fringe as the numbers were to Lost, where they're like this really cool enigma that you get to wonder about, but you never really get a definite answer to, which I would be totally okay with, because as long as it's not a really significant issue, I like open-ended mystery, you know?
Yeah.
Because keep getting to theorize about it. But as for the episode, the first time I watched it, when I first saw August, my honest thought was, oh, they couldn't get Michael Cerveris to play the Observer. That's a little weird. And so I'm watching it. So when they say that there's more than one Observer, I was legitimately like freaking out.
Oh.
And I was like, whoa, no way. There's more than one. And then my thought was, wait a minute. If there's more than one, you know, there's at least 12 of these scientific team. Why is September the only one that's ever been captured on camera? Is he just like really bad at being stealthy? Or do none of the other ones actually go out there and observe anything?
I think he's really bad at being stealthy. You mean you saw him get caught in Walternet's lab that messed up the whole Peter Q thing?
Maybe he's getting caught on camera on purpose to send a message to the Fringe team, so the Fringe team can start looking into the observers, because he knows that they're going to need the extra help before they have their problems with the observers later.
I like that idea.
I like that too.
Or maybe he was just the first one. Like maybe the others are just getting into the whole observing thing.
Yeah, maybe.
Or he just wants to become famous.
Maybe so. All right, Devin, anything else?
Also, again, it was great to see Brandon. This is the first episode Brandon was in, right? I think so.
We saw him once before.
Really?
Yeah.
It kind of made me miss Brandon in season 4.
Yeah.
A bit, because I'm like, oh, we only got like 2 episodes, if that, with Brandon in it, and then
I think so.
You know, he was a shapeshifter, got killed off. Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
Well, you got to talk to the real Brandon here.
That's true.
This could be shapeshifter Brandon we're talking to.
Or from a different universe, or from a different timeline.
And then it just made me miss like the goofball, you know, comic relief characters. And then let's see, what else do I have in my notes? Oh yeah, there was a plane crash again. Just something that is always in a J.J. Abrams show.
Yeah.
Because I think one of the earlier Rewatch podcasts, there was a plane that crashed with like, was the Porky Man Beast or something?
That's right, the transformation.
That's right. I just wonder, like, you know, if that's purposely a recurring theme, if they just like crashing airplanes. I just thought it was interesting to point out.
Yeah.
And then lastly, Fringe loves their parallels. Like every episode since season 2 has had some form of a parallel in it.
Yeah.
So what I was wondering is, how much are they going to parallel this to the coming invasion with the observers? Because I think this episode is potentially telling us a lot about how the good observers are going to act. And I think there's going to have to be a lot of making people important. And I really have like no theories as to what that means, but I'll be interested to see how they tie this episode in with the Purge, and maybe potentially, you know, making the Fringe team important, or Ella important, or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, I think you're right. I just looking back on it now, I mean, we have so many things that we know now, pardon me, that we didn't know at the time, that we look back on, and they make so much more sense now. Even with the comment, you know, about what Walter did to save Peter, and why he went over there to get Peter in the first place. We didn't know all that at the time, so I think there will be more stuff that we'll be able to look back on this episode after season 5 and go, oh man, that clue was given to us and we just didn't know what to do with it.
Right. And then one last question for you guys is, especially like December seems to be really, you know, by the rules. So my question is, do you guys think all of these, you know, I'm assuming 12 main observers are going to be all good, or do you think some of them are still going to be evil? And like, yeah, I'm just wondering like what the number of good observers is going to be.
I think it will be a shade of gray. I think every one of them will have their own motive, purpose, or objective. Like September will be with the Bishop and Olivia. August will be like with Kristen Hollis, and probably July with someone else, and like December probably a strict by the book rule guy. I don't know, something like that.
I don't know.
Because ultimately they are human beings, and human beings got their own like selfish motivation.
Right.
I think it's worth noting that of the observers that we've seen so far, we didn't see any of them in 2036.
That's right.
I don't know if that means they just weren't available for that week of filming, or if it actually is that all of those 12, or I guess we're down to 11 now, unless they just tossing this out there. Does anybody think that are the month designations, are they unique, or now that this August dies, is there someone else going to come up and you have a new August?
Well, I think they were just code names. I think we got that answer. So I think they might just be the 12 original team of scientists that were sent as a what's the military word of that unit that goes in?
Beachhead?
No, that's not the word I was thinking of. Like, is it recon or something? I don't.
Yeah, the covert ops.
Yeah. So that's what I'm thinking they are.
Yeah, I think probably what happened is because their Earth or their place is deteriorating, and therefore they form this scientific team to observe the past in order to fix the future. And probably this 12 scientific guys goes back to their time and actually say things like, "Oh, we've grown attached to these people, blah blah blah, and we can't do anything. We just have to go through, the time, and just don't do anything." And maybe because people like hates that kind of idea, that they actually expect scientists to deliver results and what they want, and probably they go on revolution, and therefore they go back to our time and like do horrible things.
Yeah, it could carry forth a biblical parallel, because we've seen that a few times on the show where there's some sort of biblical parallels. And, there were 12 spies that were sent out in the Old Testament to go kind of spy out the Promised Land. And they came back and gave a report, and only 2 of them gave a report that said, we can go in and conquer this land. That was Caleb and Joshua. So it could be that maybe they go out and they spy out the land, if you will, and they report back, and maybe August and September said, no, we shouldn't do this. Kind of the opposite case in this way. But the rest of them said, we can, we should go forward with this plan. I don't know, just a crazy thought, I think, but
I like that. It's interesting.
I had a couple of other thoughts on here, and Heather, you pretty much mentioned this when you were going through yours, and that was that there were more and more observer sightings that were coming up, and we learned that there were 26 sightings in the last 3 months, and my thought was that these are because of the Fringe events. The Fringe events are what brought the Fringe team together, and the Fringe team might be what ends up being the end of the observers or their observer plan if they are able to defeat them in the future. So that might be why the observers are more interested in that. We also saw some reoccurring themes in this episode, particularly with parents and offspring. We saw again the story of Peter and Walter and their memories of the lake. We saw Christine and her memories of her parents, and we also saw Olivia recount a story of her and her mom when they went to see a movie for the first time, and Olivia didn't realize the movie hadn't even started yet. She thought it was the best thing ever. But those were all kind of these parent and child experiences that we got to see told over this episode. And then one more parallel I saw, in this one, August said, I think it's what they call feeling, which reminded me of what September said in the season 4 episode, A Short Story About Love, where he said, I believe you call it love. And so we have these observers trying to figure out what human emotion is all about. All right. Any other thoughts on the episode August?
No.
All right. We spent a lot of time on that one. All right. Let's move on. The glyphs in this one spell blight, and the clue was at the hotel. August has some Chinese takeout, which has a dragon or maybe a snakehead on. Not really a snakehead like we saw, but that Chinese dragon, which we'll see very prominently while in Chinatown in the episode Snakehead. The synopsis says, after a cargo ship runs aground near Boston, the shoreline becomes littered with bodies hosting large parasites. The science team examines the corpses and discovers that the mysterious organisms provide remarkable immunodeficiency qualities. As the investigation unfolds, Walter recaptures some of his personal style and begins to find his own way again in the world, only to place Astrid in grave peril. This episode was written by David Wilcox and directed by Paul Holohan. Let's see. Alan, I think you're up this time.
How appropriate.
Okay.
Okay. Well, this episode is the setting is more in Chinatown. I think a lot of people really don't like this episode because it's a monster of the week or one-off episode.
Yeah.
But I particularly like it because it's a good episode, and I actually remember rewatching it a lot of times, and I still enjoyed it, especially seeing people with creepy crawlies on their mouth.
Yeah.
That's really a shocking scene to enjoy.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the main thing that I got from this episode is that we never get the answer who is behind these genetically engineered hookworms, but we got the answer in a different timeline, which is in season 4, and we know that it's William Bell.
Right.
And I was wondering if could it be Bell behind in this timeline, or maybe we don't really get the answer because the writers know that they will give the answer in the future, and therefore at this moment of time it's not really important to answer that question. So what do you guys think about that?
I think it's pretty reasonable to assume that if Bell was behind it in season 4, that he was behind it in this season. And I think even what it could be is this what the lymph node was, whatever it was, and these, we learned had really strong immunodeficiency powers to really boost the immune system. So that could be all part of him trying to build a utopian society. And that society means if it's going to be truly utopian, then there's no, sickness or death maybe. And so this would be an instrumental part of making that happen.
Or, speaking of which, because the hookworm actually has the medicine, I was wondering if whether Bell is actually trying to find a creature that will save his life-threatening cancer. Is it cancer, right?
Yeah. I like that. Yeah.
And they also mentioned the man who has the company who's selling all these things, John Su.
Uh-huh.
They say that's an alias, and they never find out who this John Su is.
Right.
Yep.
We already know that, we find out later, Bell is just fine using different names,
Right.
and we also know for sure that he's totally okay experimenting on humans.
Yep.
And Walter mentions in this episode how the worms were designed to grow in humans, and so they could be working for Belly, or we don't know how much of the organization is working for Belly, or some of it he designed them, and the guy working at the herbalist shop, he just came upon them randomly, or if he's also part of the whole big conspiracy or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would like to present a counter argument.
Okay.
I don't think that William Bell is behind all of the events of seasons 1 through 3.
Okay.
Okay.
I think that, especially because of Leonard Nimoy's retirement, that the producers couldn't have planned for all that back way in the beginning.
Sure.
I think that it may be possible that William Bell, once they decided that he was going to be in charge of all this stuff, William Bell went through and figured out, okay, here's all the different creatures that people have created, maybe I can use those, rather than him having some part in the creativeness. I mean, I think it's more likely that he realized this is useful to me. I should get in contact with the people who did create it and maybe get a couple samples just to help further my goals.
He doesn't need to do that because he got Massive Dynamic to do that for him.
Right. I'm just saying that. I think.
No, I mean, he doesn't need to contact the people who made it because you have the Massive Dynamic, which is associated with FBI, and he could just ask, a massive Dynamic employee to grab a sample from FBI.
Right, but still, I don't think he had a hand in creating it. I think someone else did, and he's just using it.
Yeah.
We already know he's okay, like, taking Walter's ideas and building on them, so he would be okay with taking other people's ideas and using them.
Yep.
That's true.
Also, I noticed in this episode that Walter got lost in Chinatown, and he ended up going to the house of a Chinese lady called Faye.
Right.
And it's actually a good, like, a parallel to how Walter Net is actually cheating, or is it cheating, his wife, Elizabeth, with a Chinese lady.
Oh, I thought you were going to talk about Faye from the show Wings.
Oh, no.
I'm just kidding. It's a terrible joke. Okay.
Yeah, and then obviously the Chinatown setting is like the setting where the other Olivia, faux Olivia, had her pregnancy, or where she actually delivered her baby.
Yep.
That's all I got.
Okay. Brandon, what about you?
Okay, something that I've seen this episode 3 times now. Something that bothered me the second and third times was Walter's self-differentiation, his whole mission to become more independent.
Mm-hmm.
Did that come out of nowhere for anybody else? Or it seemed just rather sudden, and it disappears by the next episode?
Yeah, it did.
He's a weird guy. He's just random, like, he blurbs up different things every time you see him. Like, of human action, he just got bored suddenly because there's no food and there's nobody. So I don't think it's a surprise to see him saying, "Oh, I want to be independent today."
True. Some other things I had.
Okay.
I'm really glad that Peter got captured in this episode. Because during this rewatch, I realized we have so many different episodes where Olivia gets captured by this person or that person. Just so many times. It's really nice to see someone else get the brunt of it for a change.
Open?
What?
The Chinese guy said, open?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Some other things I thought. I think, Daryl, you had mentioned way back with the pilot episode about how the FBI team had shrunk over the episodes. I thought it was nice that this time when they'd stormed the boat, it's nice to see an actual large number of people.
Yeah, that's a good point.
What other notes did I have? I like that Astrid referred to the lab as Bishop's live bait.
Yes.
Okay, a little bit of a story. in college, I wouldn't be able to watch these episodes as they aired because I had class and homework and such. So what I would do is when I got on break, I would then watch through the episodes like rapidly, like a couple a day. This was the episode that I realized it was not a good idea to watch these while eating lunch.
Yeah, it's pretty gross, man. Yeah.
This is really gross. This ranks up there with that episode with the giant bugs. Not really giant bugs, but the bugs in season 3.
Out of I thought you meant the one we just saw a few episodes ago where the
one where people were getting infested by bugs.
I got you.
Yeah.
So
it will be nasty if you're actually watching the episode while eating like calamari or squid.
Well, I was eating pasta.
Close enough. Close enough. And all those tentacles, you know.
Yeah. But I think the grossest part for me was not necessarily the graphicness, although that was pretty bad, but the sound.
Yeah.
The sound design of these episodes was just... Yeah.
I'm with you.
My last point that I had was at the end of the episode, Walter's singing a song about he steps into the lion's den and tells them all he knows, which that's not the first time he's sung that.
Right.
I can't remember the name of the episode, but it was the one where they're hunting a giant snake thing in the sewers.
That's right.
Back in season 1.
Yeah.
Can't remember the name of that at all, but
I know
I heard that song.
I'll look it up real quick. Yeah.
It was the
Unleashed?
Oh, it is Unleashed.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
it. Yeah, it starts with a U. Yeah, Unleashed.
Yeah, Unearthed is next week.
Yep.
And that's all I got.
All right. Devin?
The whole Walter thing, it was very sudden, and that part of it annoyed me, but I did like the fact that it was almost like a role reversal where he was the child. It was very comedic at times.
Yeah.
I really, really liked that. Seeing Peter trying to kind of almost act like a father to his father was very interesting to watch. Let's see, what else hasn't been talked about? The makeup. Like, I know we talked about, like, the gore and everything. Just, like, I don't know if they take actual people and just apply a lot of makeup to them or if they have dummies or something, but just, like, the scene where there's bodies scattered along the shore and their jaws are, like, completely hanging open and side of their faces missing was pretty gory. But the creepiest part, gore-wise for me, of the episode was, I mean, there wasn't very much blood. It's just the way it was done. It was creepy. Was when the gang member, like the Triad gang member, was in the interview room.
Yeah, slicing his throat.
Just like the creepy grin
Yes.
as he's bleeding out from his neck, and like you could see inside his neck. It's like, oh, that's just creepy.
Yeah, I forgot about that until you mentioned it. Yeah, that was gross.
And then lastly, let's see here. Oh, Walter putting the tracker in his neck.
Yeah.
When I initially watched this episode, I didn't really care for that. I'm like, oh, well, that's a little over the top. Walter is little too. It's an overreaction. You don't really need to go do that.
Uh-huh.
But then to see that pay off in the very next episode, it then made much more sense, and I actually really liked it. But, I mean, just who does that to themselves?
Well, he
Walter?
did say Walter. That's the type of
Walter
thing that he
does,
would
right.
do.
He's experimented on himself all the time.
Sure.
That's true.
Yeah.
So I think that's all I've got that hasn't been talked about.
All right. What about you, Heather?
One note, like they mentioned how Walter was starting to choose his own clothes and whatever.
Uh-huh.
In this episode, in a way, he kind of reminded me of Walter in that he was very dressed up and formal looking, you know, not quite the same style, but he was acting different and not quite like himself, like we know, you know. Instead of sweaters, he's wearing a suit and a vest.
Yeah.
And so there was that. And also, well, the part mentioned earlier about Walter being the son to Peter, like they've had little hints in episodes where he'll say, you know, calm down or like other stuff to him, but this one brought it out really big. But of course, it made me think. In a way, it's I guess a way to show and have people sympathize with people who have parents who have Alzheimer's disease, or people that are taking care of a family member with a disability, because they want to do things on their own, but they can't, or they can only do it to a certain point, and you have to step in, like with Walter here. And we find out later, it's because he went crazy for a while, but it's because he does have a disability in that he's missing some of his brain. So
right,
he's not going to act the same as Walter Net, who is the whole version of himself, but different. So.
yeah. Okay. Anything else? I had a couple of notes. One was, this was really cool to see Peter speaking Cantonese quite often. I mean, he did a great job in this episode. We've seen Olivia or Anna Torv, do some foreign language skills before. This is the first time we saw Josh Jackson doing it. But he's
very good.
Oh, Peter speaks Farsi earlier in the series.
That's true. I think you corrected me. That's right. But when he first does it there at the hospital, Olivia's like, "You speak Cantonese?" And he says, "You should get to know me a little bit," And I think they get to know each other a little bit as the series goes on. And the other thing, one thing I've always loved about this episode, it just has a different feel to it, because I think you have Walter and Astrid out of the lab, and you see them truly care for one another. At the point when he notices that she's following him, they embrace, not physically, but I mean, they connect, I guess is a better way to say it, and decide to, as friends, to enjoy this time together. And the Walter and the different clothing that he puts on, I don't know, it just has a totally different feel to me than just about any other Fringe episode. And I've always liked the feel that this episode had, the coloring and they're out in bright, busy Chinatown. I don't know, it's a unique episode for me, and I've always really, really liked it. All right, let's move on to the final episode. This is definitely the longest summer rewatch podcast yet. The glyphs in this one spelled hidden, and the clue was, while they were in Chinatown, there was a sign that said ginseng improves memory. And of course, we're dealing with memory loss a whole lot in the episode Gray Matters. The synopsis says patients at mental hospitals undergo impromptu surgeries that take part of their brain and cure their symptoms. The leader of the hybrid army searches for what he needs in our universe and directly confronts Olivia during his mission. Peter and Walter face a difficult situation that may cost Walter his life. William Bell resurfaces under strange circumstances and raises questions about his ultimate objectives. This episode was written by Zach Stintz and Ashley Miller and directed by Jeannot Schwark. All right. I guess I'll go first on this one. I think some of these questions I wrote down before I had the answers. But a couple of things I have here. Small things. We see Peter mentioning a lot of Casablanca in this. There's one scene when they're kind of driving along in the car. We'll see that come back to play with Folivia when he doesn't realize it's with Folivia. And he's talking about Casablanca, and she doesn't know what Casablanca is. It would have been nice to see this Olivia have more of a response, a connection with, oh yeah, I liked that part in Casablanca. I know who Sidney Greenstreet is, or she didn't. She just kind of looked at him. But had she been more interactive here, when we see the Casablanca reference later in season 3, it would have been even, I think, a stronger clue that this was not his Olivia. But it was kind of cool still to see that anyway. And we also saw Walter mention Violet Sedan Chair. So this is the first time in Fringe that we've heard of the band Violet Sedan Chair. And of course, that'll come into play in a very prominent way with the episode Firefly, or the Firefly. Couple other quickie notes that I had, because I want to give you guys all the time for this, but Broyles made the comment at the end of the episode that there's only one Walter Bishop. Not so fast. There is another Walter Bishop. And this is the first episode that we have mention of the Blight, and it'll take a little while, but we'll finally get to see the actual Blight and how it affects the Redverse here before too long. All right, so those are my thoughts on it. I'll let you guys take the stage now, and I think we're back up to Brandon.
Okay, so this, since it dealt with brains, obviously reminded me a lot of Letters of Transit. Not in Transit, that's something completely different. One thing I noticed was just a technical error. In this one, they take the brain pieces out, and we're told that the nutrient bath won't keep it alive for more than 5 hours, 6 if we're lucky.
Right.
Yet in Letters of Transit, I just looked up the quote. Nina said that brain tissue can deteriorate in neuromatter can decay in seconds. You can't just carry it around in a petri dish.
In petri dish, yes. But if you actually soak it with something like a chemical, probably it could preserve it. Because they have this, they actually put it in like a preservative jar or something like that.
Okay. So why couldn't they have done that in 2036?
No idea.
They actually had to go get it instead of carrying it back. But anyway, this was yet another episode where William Bell's presence was spoiled by the credits.
See, I never look at them, so it doesn't bother me.
Credits.
I always read them, and I always regret reading that, because I was mad at the end of season 4. They spoiled it. They spoiled it. Special guest star Leonard Nimoy, and he shows up in the last couple minutes.
Just see you and Clint. You just stop reading the credits. You won't be spoiled.
I know. But I can't help it. It's words. I read them. I like knowing if there were people that I recognize, unless they're like hidden.
Yeah.
If we're not supposed to know about them, then I'm just gonna get really ticked off at Fox for doing that. But anyway, there was. I also liked how when the brain pathways are connected, he reacts his demeanor changes so much. It's a much darker personality, similar to that of Walternet, who has his whole brain, and also similar to that of himself in 2036 when he gets his brain back.
Yeah.
There was also... So, one thing that I'm wondering is, did this episode... Or I'm pretty sure this episode, along with, I guess, most of the season, didn't take place in the revised timeline, because there are the 3 brain pieces there, and in 2036, we see those same 3 brain pieces, or I'm assuming they're the same ones, unless he has just various pieces of his brain just lying around here and there. Which makes me wonder, why in the future were they placed into storage in Massive Dynamic, versus this time around they were placed into other people?
Yeah, I was wondering about that too, and I couldn't quite remember if in 2036 if we saw them in the kind of the big brain chunks like we saw in this episode, or if they were just kind of slivers.
They were little slivers. I just saw this a couple days ago, actually.
Yeah, and
they were little pieces. I'm not sure if they were exactly the same, but I know there were 3 of them.
Right, and so slivers is what I was remembering too, but I wasn't really sure, and so my thought was that maybe they were both. Maybe William put 90% of them in these people's brains and then kept a sliver back at Massive Dynamic just in case. I don't know. I had the same question,
Wouldn't that not worked this time? I mean, if there were just still pieces missing.
You would think so.
The thing is, William Bell retrieved or did the surgery in this season, in this Blue Universe timeline, in 1995. But in the revised timeline, or in the alternate timeline, Walter remembered William Bell visiting him in 2005. So there's actually a discrepancy over there. So I was wondering, probably there's some events that, either it didn't happen or has been modified in the alternate universe.
Yeah.
Or alternate timeline.
Yeah. And it's very, very quite possible, actually.
Right, because this time around, William Bell is obviously alive, whereas in the revised timeline, he's not as obviously alive.
Right.
I guess is the best way I can put that.
Okay.
I had one more point, but assuming someone else is going to mention that one, so I'll leave that one out there. Someone else.
All right. Devyn?
So this episode was perhaps one of my favorites in season 2. And initially I thought it was a standalone, and this was just their way of explaining how Walter became like he is. You know, it wasn't just pure insanity. He actually legitimately is missing pieces of his brain.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was, a nice, standalone episode. They got that answered. Cool, whatever. But then the farther we've gone along in the series, the more and the more I've started to like this episode because they keep going back to that episode. Because I just assumed, okay, well, the brain, tissue's dead. That's all they're going to give us about, Walter's brain pieces. And then I think season 2 finale, Walter gets all angry at Belle for cutting out pieces of his brain, and Belle's like, it's because you asked me to. And then I thought, okay, well, that's it. That's the end of that answer because you wanted me to. Cool, that's it. And then season 4, they come back to it again. It's just nice seeing this strung out, so long over the entire series and still getting more out of it, even to this day. And then let's see here, Newton. Really love this episode because out of all the villains we've had, I'd have to say Newton is probably my favorite.
Okay.
Simply because he's so creepy, because he's polite, but sinister.
Yeah.
Because he's British.
Well, so is Jared Harris, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, it's just so cool because he's so like, yeah. Even the people he performed the surgery on in the episode, like, oh yeah, this really really nice guy came and cut open my head.
Yeah.
And I just loved his character. I was kind of sad to see him go. One thing I was starting. This is the point in season 2 where I started to get annoyed about them dragging out the Peter storyline. And they did that in this episode a bit more, but I kind of liked the way they did this when they strapped Walter up to the chair and they gave him the injection. They're like showing him the slideshow.
Oh, yeah. And
asking him to say the first word that comes to mind. And like there's like 3 pictures in a row, like, oh, Peter. And he's all happy and everything, and then it's like a picture of a coffin.
Yes.
And he's like, Peter. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool, but they're still stretching it out. I just want Peter to figure out already.
Yeah.
And then my one negative point about this episode was this incredibly cheesy one-liner that Olivia gives. She's like holding Newton down at gunpoint, and I'm paraphrasing, but something along the lines of, if you so much as move, you won't have another head to refreeze. And it was so bad.
I like that line.
I liked it. I liked it because it was bad, but it was funny. I literally laughed out loud when I was watching it. I'm like, oh, they went there. And then what I'm wondering now that 2036 Walter has his brain back, and I wouldn't say he's evil by any stretch of the imagination. In my opinion, he almost feels like a lesser version of Walternate, like somewhere between Walter and Walternate. Original timeline Walternate. I have to clarify that. So what I'm wondering is, what does that mean for Walter in terms of season 5? Like, having used his brain pieces and given them back to him, is that going to kind of come back to haunt us future in season 5? Like, is that going to be an issue later?
Oh, of course.
Probably.
Nothing has its lack of consequences.
Yeah. That's true.
Yep.
Or he can just experiment with himself, like take out a piece of brain every episode and then put it back.
I guess. All right. Anything else, Devyn?
Nope. I think that's it.
All right. Heather?
Okay. I also had some thoughts on when the Peter and seeing the coffin thing. They say like they're in that basement area and that he couldn't get the information there because he had to go where he thought of it. And Peter's like, oh, at the lake. And they're like, no, he didn't think of it at the lake. He thought of it at his house because that's where Peter died, and that's where he used the window to see the other Peter. So that's why they had to go to his house. do that.
Nice.
We have the jars that his brain was in. They were all red colored, so we had 3 red jars. And then when they turned it on and had it activate with his brain, they all turned green. So we had red, 3 reds, and then green, and then it went back to red afterwards. So we're having the color theme continue there. And of course, the medicine at the end, what they give to Peter, they give him the blue, the yellow, and then the red,
right?
Which is the different colors for our universes that we have. So they're keeping up with that.
Yeah.
At the end, when we have our Dr. Paris is Bell moment, Walter asks him, "What if we have to go back?" And Bell says, "I'll put it in a place only I can find," which of course lets Bell have all the power and use it because he's the one who knows where it is, and that's what he goes ahead and does with it.
Yeah, and I think it points to the fact that Bell is behind all these shapeshifters and Newton and all that stuff.
So they had the previously where they had the quote of with Bell in his office, and he says the storm is coming, and when it passes, little will be left of our world. We get to see a storm at the end of season 4 that will destroy the worlds. And then in the previously, they also have, right, maybe it's in somewhere in this, the episode, but they say there's going to be global destruction on the biblical scale. So we see destruction in season 4, and we have the biblical scale in that they're making a new world, and he's making his start in the new world and creating these, beings to live there. So, yeah. And Broyles, near the end of the episode, says, "The more answers we get, the more questions they lead to," which is true about all the Fringe cases and us as viewers.
That's right.
Yeah. Yep. And we also get an example of Olivia using her photographic memory because she remembered all the frozen heads, so she could bring that back up to know a specific one.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
That's it.
All right, Alan, you have anything else?
Well, there's the watch of Newton got a massive dynamic logo, which we never really get to figure out what's the point of that, or whether if that's just pointing out that William Bell's connection with the shapeshifters and stuff like that.
That's what I'm thinking. I forgot about it. I didn't even pick up on that this time, but I remember that from back in season 2 when we originally did it.
Yeah, and at that, if I remember it correctly, at that period of time, we were trying to figure out how William Bell chopped off Newton's head and cryoprotect it, and when did it happen, how it did happen, what's the circumstances of that, and we never got the answer.
Right. That's one of those things. I think we all would agree that Newton seemed to have ended too soon. I wish they never would have killed him, or at least brought him back like they did Jones.
Yeah, all our villains just got killed so quickly. So, yeah, it's really could be frustrating, but that's how it is. I guess it's not really that important, maybe, because we have a new breed of shapeshifters.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we have William Bell using his alias, Dr. Simon Paris, and well, Dr. Paris, that name actually appeared in the Brave New World, which is actually the name signed in the visitor sheet. So, yeah, that's all I got.
Okay. I have one question that I'm confused about, and that is, based on the timeline that we were given here, it looks like Walter's brain pieces were taken out of his head while he was in St. Clair's.
Yeah.
And we've been led to believe that Walter asked William to take those pieces out of his head because of the destructive nature that was building up within him. But if he's in St. Clair's, who's he going to hurt? So I'm confused. Did they mess up the timeline here, or am I missing something?
He wants to get rid of the brain pieces that would lead to the creation or remembering how to build the door or the portal or the window to the alternate universe. Because he is able to make that door, he stole Peter from alternate.
Yeah, but didn't we learn in the Brave New World Part 2, that Bell has got this god complex, this megalomaniac type of personality that is what Walter was developing, and that's why Walter asked him to take those brain pieces away. That didn't necessarily have anything to do with the doorway.
No, at this point it's about the doorway because Newton was trying to figure out how Walter built the door, so he can actually build that door for Walternet to go to this universe.
In the comics that were released in like season 1 or whatever, I don't know how relevant they are to this show, but in the comics, before Walter meets Olivia and they take him from St. Clair's, there's a whole sequence with Walter being in the hospital and being interrogated by some kind of people that want to get information from him. So maybe he wanted to keep the information secret. 2, he didn't want to become like Walterman. But if he really wanted to keep the information secret from these people that are going to come interrogate him, he can just take the information out of his brain.
Sure.
And they couldn't. The people in the comic couldn't get the information from him, even though they kept trying.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm still confused about it. I'm still not satisfied.
I really think it's just about the doorway because that's the whole point of this episode.
Yeah.
I would agree with that because at the end, William Bell tells, right as the surgery is beginning, he tells him that you need to think about how you created this doorway, so that I interpreted that as that's how he's locating what neural pathways go where and which parts of the brain he needs to remove.
Sure. Maybe so. All right. Any other thoughts, guys? Lady?
I have one.
Okay.
We mentioned that about the 3 pictures of Peter. I thought it was interesting that, the first picture was a young boy. The third one was a coffin. I'm pretty sure the second one was some custard.
Yeah.
Is that what it was? Okay.
I'm pretty sure about that, which goes back to the season 2 premiere in which Walter says that, "Oh, Peter, you loved custards as a boy," and Peter said, "No, I didn't."
Yeah. Okay. I didn't know what it was, but that would make sense. Okay. Very good. All right. Wow. This is a lot of information tonight, guys. Thanks for all of your insight, and hopefully our listeners will appreciate it too. Let me go ahead and give our contact information. And while I'm doing that, you guys can think about your cheesy sign off. Now,
I think you need to give the glyphs and the clue.
Oh, thank you, Zero. Let me slip back over here. The glyphs were portal. And the clue for the next episode, huh?
It's a good game.
Oh, the clue for next episode were we saw some butterfly drawings, and they foreshadow the town. The next episode is Johari Window, and those people have this permutation secret, and so that butterfly kind of gave us an allusion into that. So, all right, let me go ahead and bring the schedule up for next week and mention that we are going to be talking about episodes. Let me pull this up here. 211 through 215, and Devyn and Aaron and Hank are going to be joining us for that episode. So, Devyn, you'll be back with us next week.
Sounds good.
Yep. Our contact information, if you want to call us on the Fringe phone, you can do that at 304-837-2278. You can also email us over at feedback@thefringepodcast.com. You can check out all of our productions at Golden Spiral Media, that Golden Spiral Media produces, over at goldenspiralmedia.com. Follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/goldenspiralmedia. And Twitter is Fringe Observers. So that's all the ways you can connect with us. I believe we're all filled up now for our schedule for the rest of the year. We want to thank everyone who's signed up. We've had some great participants. You guys are just some really good examples of that, and certainly want to thank each of you, not only for joining this week, but for sticking it out for this really long podcast we had this week. Thank you so much.
I have a quick question.
Alrighty.
Are you counting 211 as unearthed?
Oh, thank you so much for bringing that up. That's such a good question. I am not. We are going to do unearthed at the very end of the season. And that's because that's the way the DVDs are laid out, which to me, the DVDs are the way that they intended them to be done. That's also the way they are in iTunes. And so we're going to do that episode, which was a season 1 episode that was never aired. We're going to do that at the very end of season 2. So what we're going to be doing next week, I've got it pulled up right here. All right, we're going to do, we're not doing Unearthed. I mentioned we're doing Johari Window, What Lies Below, The Bishop Revival, Jacksonville, and Peter. Oh my goodness, we might have a 3-hour episode next week. And then we'll do Unearthed at the very end of the season, because it really isn't part of this season, even though it was aired during this season. Great question. Thank you for bringing that up. All right. Any other things from anybody?
No.
Nope.
All right. Zero. I hope you sleep well with the rest of your evening here. What is it, 3 in the morning there now?
3 a.m.
Yeah.
Good luck with that circadian rhythm of yours.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. Time to sign off, so I'll go first. Until next time, stay Fringe-tastic.
May the verse be with you. All of them.
Can't wait to arrive in season 5.
Nice.
Don't invalidate me, and I need to sleep.
All right.
And I'll be out in a flash of blue light.
The Fringe Podcast and Golden Spiral Media are not associated with Bad Robot Productions, Warner Brothers, or Fox. Golden Spiral Media's use of any and all copyrighted material is only for parody, news analysis, critique, and for educational purposes, as provided within United States Code Title 17, aka Fair Use. Copyright 2012, Golden Spiral Media.